Tired of being disrespected? Avoid these 10 toxic habits that can alienate others. It's easy to fall into negative habits that can harm our relationships, our mental health, and our overall well-being. By avoiding the following toxic behaviors, you can cultivate a more positive and fulfilling life. 1. Gossiping. Spreading rumors or negative information about others can damage relationships and erode trust. My friend Sarah used to gossip constantly. She was always talking about other people's lives, spreading rumors and negative information. It was exhausting and made me feel uncomfortable. I tried to talk to her about it, but she just brushed me off. She didn't seem to understand how her gossiping was hurting others. Eventually, I decided to distance myself from her. It was painful, but I knew it was for the best. I couldn't continue to be friends with someone who was so disrespectful and hurtful. Gossiping can damage relationships and erode trust. It's important to choose your friends wisely and surround yourself with positive and supportive people. 2. Being flaky. Being unreliable and frequently canceling plans can frustrate and annoy others. My friend Mark was always flaky. He would make plans and then cancel at the last minute, or he would show up late without a good excuse. It was frustrating and unreliable. I tried to be understanding at first, but it was getting to the point where I couldn't count on him. I felt like I was always the one accommodating his schedule, and it was starting to take a toll on our friendship. I finally had a serious conversation with Mark about his unreliability. I explained how it was affecting our friendship and how much it bothered me. He was apologetic and promised to try harder. Unfortunately, things didn't change. Mark continued to be flaky, and eventually, I realized that our friendship wasn't working. I decided to distance myself from him and focus on relationships with people who were more reliable. Being flaky can damage relationships and erode trust. It's important to be reliable and follow through on your commitments. 3. Complaining constantly. Focusing on negative aspects of life can make you unpleasant to be around and drain the energy of others. Probably every one of us meet a person who was always complaining. It seemed like no matter what was going on, he always had something negative to say. He'd complain about the weather, the traffic, his job, his relationships, everything. It was exhausting to be around him. People like that have constant negativity and had a toxic effect on friendships. I found myself avoiding people like that, dreading our conversations. Complaining made us feel drained and unhappy. Eventually, we distance ourselves from complainers. Constant complaining can be harmful to relationships. It's important to focus on the positive aspects of life and avoid spreading negativity. 4. Being self-centered. Only being concerned with your own needs and wants without considering others' feelings or perspectives. I remember one guy who was always talking about himself. It seemed like every conversation was about his accomplishments, his problems, or his opinions. He never asked about anyone else, and he always managed to steer the conversation back to himself. It was exhausting to be around this guy. He was so self-absorbed that it was difficult to have a meaningful conversation with him. He seemed completely oblivious to the needs and feelings of others. Eventually, I decided to distance myself from him. I didn't want to be friends with someone who was so self-centered and inconsiderate. Being self-centered can damage relationships and alienate others. It's important to be considerate of others and show genuine interest in their lives. 5. Breaking promises. Failing to follow through on your commitments can erode trust and damage relationships. I remember the time I broke promise. For me, it was unacceptable, and this was my fault. I feel terrible about it, and I knew it was bad. The person I have promised was disappointed. I apologized profusely, but I could tell she was still hurt. It was a valuable lesson for me. I realized that breaking promises can damage relationships and erode trust. From that day forward, I made a conscious effort to be more reliable and follow through on my commitments. I learned that keeping my word is important to me, and I don't want to let anyone down again. This is awful behavior, and I am not surprised people don't like this behavior. 6. Being condescending. Talking down to others or acting superior can make you seem arrogant and disrespectful. I remember working with a guy named Dave who was always condescending. He'd talk down to people, acting like he was superior to everyone else. It was incredibly annoying and off-putting. People would avoid interacting with Dave whenever possible. He was so arrogant and dismissive that it made it difficult to have a normal conversation with him. It was like he was always trying to prove how smart and knowledgeable he was. Eventually, Dave was fired from his job. His condescending attitude had alienated his coworkers and made it impossible for him to work effectively in a team environment. Being condescending can damage relationships and alienate others. It's important to treat everyone with respect and avoid talking down to people. 7. Being a know-it-all. Constantly trying to show off your knowledge or correct others can be annoying and off-putting. Have you ever met a person who knows everything and who always tries to show off how smart he is? He'd interrupt conversations, correct people's mistakes, and offer unsolicited advice. It was incredibly annoying and off-putting. People would avoid talking to know-it-all person whenever possible. He was so arrogant and condescending that it made it difficult to have a normal conversation with him. It was like he was always trying to prove how superior he was. Being a know-it-all can bring difficulties in making relationships. It's important to be humble and open to learning from others. 8. Being passive-aggressive. Expressing anger or frustration indirectly can be confusing and hurtful. I remember working with a woman who was always passive-aggressive. She'd make snide remarks, roll her eyes, or ignore people when she was upset. It was incredibly frustrating and confusing. You never knew what she was really thinking or feeling. She'd bottle up her emotions and then explode in a passive-aggressive outburst. It was like walking on eggshells around her. People avoided interacting with her whenever possible. She was so negative and difficult to be around. It was a toxic environment, and it made it difficult to get anything done. Being passive-aggressive can create a toxic environment. It's important to communicate your feelings openly and honestly, rather than bottling them up and expressing them in a passive-aggressive way. 9. Being a doormat. Allowing others to take advantage of you can make you seem weak and disrespectful of yourself. I remember a colleague who was always willing to go the extra mile for others. He'd take on extra work, help out with projects, and do whatever he could to be accommodating. At first, people appreciated his willingness to help, but over time, they started to take advantage of him. They would make unreasonable demands, and he would always say yes. He became known as the office doormat. People would dump their work on him, and he'd always be there to pick up the slack. It was exhausting and unfair. Eventually, he realized that he needed to set boundaries and stop letting people take advantage of him. He started saying no to unreasonable requests and began to prioritize his own work. It was a difficult change, but it was necessary. He learned that it was okay to put his own needs first and that he didn't have to be a doormat for others. It's important to set boundaries and avoid letting others take advantage of you. You deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. By eliminating these toxic habits from your life, you can cultivate stronger relationships, improve your mental well-being, and achieve greater success. Instead of focusing on negativity and drama, shift your attention towards building positive relationships, being reliable, and fostering a supportive environment. It's never too late to make positive changes. By consciously avoiding these harmful habits, you can transform your relationships, improve your mindset, and unlock your full potential. I hope it inspires you to make positive changes in your own life. Even if just one person is motivated to adopt these habits, I'll feel that my efforts have been worthwhile. Help me and share this video. It can help other people too. If you want to improve your life, please watch this video above. Till the next time, stay strong and live wisely.